I heard you say while we were ordering, we were talking about Johnson's Furniture.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you're tied in there aside from your last name.
Well, I met Micah. I walked in here to get coffee, and Teresa we were introducing each other, and I said my background. She asked me who I was, and I said my Johnson's Furniture. My dad was Virgil, and my uncle was Everett, and both gone now. But I said I grew up in the furniture store, and Micah goes, I work there, and then he told me his name, and of course I'd seen his work,
Sure,
and so I just introduced myself, and he was telling me all the rotten jobs they had him do, but I basically grew up in the furniture store, so that was a big part of my life. So
well, and that was such an iconic place in Pelican for a really long time.
well, that's what people say, and I guess I'm happy to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that, but it was such a big part of our family.
Yeah.
My favorite time was Christmas, and people would come and order
Sure.
buy everything from sofas to dining room sets, and Dad never wrapped everything. I mean, there would be this big stockpile of huge boxes, and they'd be wrapping everything. They bought hundreds and hundreds of yards of paper.
Yeah.
That was just the best. You got to play Santa Claus, you know.
Yeah.
You deliver on Christmas Eve day, and some woman would come to the door, and you'd be standing there with a big hutch or something. Well, I didn't order this. Well, we're supposed to deliver it here, and then the tears would come.
Yeah.
It was great fun. So
That's amazing.
yeah. So I wanted to tell you, I was thinking about I've always wanted to visit with you. You've made such an impact on Andrew, my son Andy.
Thank you.
It's been, I'm just, so thankful. But you're such a teaching guru. And he was telling me all the things that you do regarding soccer.
Sure.
And I imagine you apply that same passion and your same technique to all the classes you teach. But he's applying it to baseball. So you've affected him big time on just your comments and positive reinforcement, things like that. He has just nothing to say but good things. So then I wanted to tell you, your dad, who's a teacher,
Yeah.
You're a teacher,
Yeah.
I'm a just retired teacher.
Yeah.
Best thing I ever did with my life.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I miss it every day, as a matter of fact. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we sat down, we were talking about, I do a lot of, not to the scale that Micah does, but I'm venturing more into that every year.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions I get are, when are you going to leave teaching? And my answer right now is I don't see myself leaving teaching.
Yeah.
I don't see, that's a hole in my life that only is filled in that building with those students in a way that I love making documentaries. I love,
and you're so good at it.
thank you. I love doing podcasts and seeing that grow, but working with kids every day is huge. And I'm a 5th generation teacher in my family.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. Was your mom a teacher?
Before she went into daycare.
Oh,
and
really?
Then both my grandparents were.
Wow.
And my great grandmother was as well. And they can, the name in our family goes all the way back to DeSmet, South Dakota, shortly after Laura Ingalls Wilder was there.
Wow, seriously, I know that town.
Yes.
I know that town. If you know anything about Laura, it's that town, but I can never pronounce it. How do you say it?
Yeah, DeSmet.
DeSmet.
Yeah, so there's family teaching lineage all the way back there, and so it's a great source of pride. And even hearing some of my own kids talk about I want to go be a teacher, and this
absolutely.
is kind of just what we do.
Well, Andy is, and Trudy, my daughter Trudy,
Yeah.
but your dad impacted Trudy big time. So when she went to her first day of band, and your dad had them play certain instruments to find out how thin their lips were, how much air power or whatever, how much they could do, and she came home with a French horn, and I remember walking in from work, and Trudy was playing, and I go, what is she? She just went today, and she was playing a song after her first day.
Yeah.
And your dad said, you have a gift to play French horn. And went on, and if it wasn't for music theory, she'd be teaching French horn, or she'd be a professional.
Sure.
She wanted to go to New York and play French horn.
Yeah.
And at one point, she was like I'm bragging now, was the top French horn player in the state for high school.
Yeah.
And it was because of your dad.
Yeah.
And he said, if anybody can do this, you have everything that you need to play French horn.
Yeah.
And so I was the worst French horn player under Jack Couture. I made his hair turn gray. I'm pretty sure. But I was the worst, and she was the complete opposite. So if you looked up worst French horn player in the dictionary, Paul Johnson, Pelican Rapids, 1975 through 77, worst player ever. So
We can't be good at everything. How did you get into teaching, though? Because you didn't teach music, you teach art.
no, I was and still am a professional designer, illustrator, and I worked for a company in Fargo. And you've heard the story. Merger, dial M for merger. And they merged, and everybody lost their jobs. I didn't want to move to Arizona, and somebody told me of a teaching opportunity at the community college in Alexandria, and I applied and went through all the interviews and finally got it. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And 23 years later, I had to do it part-time just so I could transition out of teaching full-time, because
Sure.
it was such a big part. I think I'd have started drinking or,
Yeah.
going off the deep end had
Yeah.
I not. But
Yeah.
it was amazing. But I will say this, I taught in college. When I tell high school teachers, that are grade school, high school, that I had maybe 2 classes a day. 2 classes a day, 3-hour classes. So I could prep, and you guys get what? 2 minutes between classes.
And four or five, yeah.
Yeah, and different prep times. It's insane. They don't pay high school, grade school teachers enough.
Yeah. How did you find, because that's a very non-traditional path to get into teaching, right? From the professional world.
Yeah, I have no teaching degree.
Yeah. What were those first years of teaching like?
It was the teachers I worked with would draw little pictures of me in a fetal position. It was crazy. It was crazy. I never thought I'd make it a day, let alone 23 years. But I finally, you get the...
Yeah.
And I had to take classes.
Yeah.
And I learned from some wonderful people. But the passion, if you have the passion and want to make a difference in somebody's life, and that was underlying for me. But it was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
The first class I ever walked into, and I thought, I'm going to make a statement. I dressed up like Julia Child. So I went to my mom, Agnes Johnson, and I said, Mom, I need a blouse, I need a skirt, a wig, and some type of a shawl. And do you have a bra or something I could use too? And, my mom, she didn't go, do we need to sit down and talk, or what's going on? What's going on with you? She just said, oh, yeah, just give me a minute. And she went out and got everything I needed. So she just knew I was always into something creative, doing something, and she knew I was starting to teach. So I dressed up like Julia Child, walked into my class. They didn't know me from Adam. He started talking like Julia Child, and it was fun. And then I used the principles and elements like macaroni is an element, and the recipes are the principles, and made up some stuff. But it was fun.
Yeah.
But so both Andy and Trudy, they heard me when I'd come home, and I'd just go, this is the best thing that ever happened.
Sure.
I didn't tell them you should go into teaching, but they just did.
Yeah.
And so when Trudy didn't go professional, she just said, I'm going to be a teacher. And it's, it's awesome for that.
Yeah.
It's a mission. It's a calling, I think.
100%,
Don't you?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And you grew up with it in your family.
Yeah.
So, but
it's just the rhythm of life for our family. Like, this is just, it's not necessarily about like, oh, I love having summers off for vacation. It's just like, this is just the rhythm of life of like, we teach during the year, and then the summer we find other stuff to do.
So
a lot
I
of
got to
times
ask
tied
you
in with
this,
teaching.
John, I got to ask you this. Have you ever had anybody tell you, oh, it must be nice to be a teacher. It must be nice. You get the summers off or whatever. My dad was one of those. I mean, he never,
Sure.
he worked himself into a grave. He worked really hard.
Yeah.
So he never got that opportunity. But I wish I could talk to him again and say, Dad, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you would spend one day as a teacher, you'd know why.
Yeah.
Because if a teacher had to teach 12 months a year, the suicide rate would be incredible, or the
attrition rate, it would be high. Yeah.
Nobody would last 5 years.
Yeah.
Nobody would last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Well, I taught ESL for 15 years, and now I teach.
Oh, wow. Bless your heart.
Now I teach primarily 7th grade civics,
Wow.
and which is a different kind of bless my heart.
Yeah. Well,
But
teaching is bless your heart.
Yes,
period.
100%. But
it is.
I tell people much more easily now that, like, if I had to work with those kids who I love dearly for 12 months a year, nobody would be happy. Nobody would be happy, and it wouldn't be a good experience for anyone. And we need the break just to all kind of breathe and reset.
I don't think we need to, we recognize spouses enough of teachers.
Yeah.
Because you don't just go to work in the morning, 3:15, 3:30, 4, whatever it is, you leave. You don't just turn it off, go home and whatever. It's with you 24/7, right?
Yeah.
And your moods are up or they're down based on that.
Yeah.
It's totally. That's what.
Well, we're living life with all of our students so much of the time, and not to the extent always that we go through the actual things they're experiencing, but we hear about them and we help them walk through it later.
Absolutely.
And so it's just a totally.
Well, you get to be a minister. You get to be a mentor, a friend. Everything, a counselor, just a coach, everything under the sun. You're doing it all.
Yeah.
I remember one young lady, she actually replaced me. She was a freshman, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I'd always give them my cell phone. My phone rings, and it's this young lady, and I pick up the phone. What's up? She said, I don't know who else to call. My car needs, I've got towed into this place, and I don't know where I'm at, and can you come and pick me up? And yeah, I'll do that. And she still talks about it.
Sure.
And now she went in. She went to BSU after ALEC, and then she went to MCAT in the cities and got her MFA, and now she replaced me. And you think, did that have anything to do with it? That I just took the time. Hey, I'm leaving my class. I got to go get another student here.
Yeah.
Then she's kind of having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that.
Yeah.
And you go home and you go, I made a difference today, even if it was taking somebody from point A to point B.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And I bet you've got gazillions of those.
Well, yeah, I do. I always talk to people about, like, when you're a new teacher, you think about all these grandiose ideas, how you're going to change the world.
Yeah.
And the reality is the grind is so hard.
Yeah.
And I have come to realize, like, my job is to be whatever these kids need me to be for today.
Yeah.
And, like, there's the arc of everything you're trying to teach and you're trying to get through and whatever, but whatever the students need us to be for the day is what they need us to be.
Yeah.
And that means that sometimes they will have epic stories like that of, like, there's this through thread with this teacher hugely impacting my life. And sometimes it'll be where you feel like you didn't have that through thread, but you get the letter 10 years later that says,
isn't that the truth?
Like, I learned about this even though you never explicitly talked about it, and you were just there and you allowed me to be me.
Isn't that
And so that's kind of how I've shifted over the years of, like, everybody's going through it, everybody's grinding. I've become a very loud mental health advocate.
Absolutely.
And so, like, how do we help everybody just kind of get to tomorrow, essentially?
Yeah.
And for a lot of kids, that's going to be what they need.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. I'm working on this grant. I had such an eye-opener thing, John. It was when I finished, a teacher told me, you got to have something going on when you're done, or you're going to go, you're going to have some issues.
Yep.
Especially if you if you love your job, and I did. I haven't worked a day in my life, John. I
Sure,
haven't.
sure.
I seriously,
Yeah.
I've worked in art, and I taught art, and then I've created art my whole time.
Yeah.
And so I haven't worked since I sold shoes up in Detroit Lakes at the Shoe Inn when I was a senior in high school. But so I applied for this grant, and it was just interviewing different people. So very similar to this, meeting people that I don't know, but with different ethnic backgrounds.
Sure.
I remember going into Kate Martinez's, she asked me to come in and talk about art. And so I walked into the same elementary school I went to school in 1975. No, not even that. Shoot. 71, 67 through 71, which is really exciting, but really so disgusting too that there's not a new school there. But anyway, I'm standing there and I see all these kids, yellow, red, black, white, orange, every color, and they're all just hugging each other and loving each other and hanging out. And I'm going, that reminds me of when I went to school here, except it was all white faces. All white. And yet they were, and I remember going, why don't I have those relationships here in Pelican? Why are all my friends just white? And so that started this grant. I want to interview people, meet people, get to know them, and start hanging out with other people in this community. And then so I interview them and then created this sculpture, and I just finished it last week. But it's been, living in Pelican, and this has been so awesome to watch Andy too. We're in the community, and he sees kids from soccer teams. So all different types of ethnic backgrounds. Hi, Mr. Johnson, and it's just the connection he has with the kids. It's just awesome, and I know you do too. I went down to the market, market, and they offered me coffee, and I talked to Abdul. And they said, oh, yeah, John Peter comes in here all the time for coffee. And I'm going, he's my man. I love that. And so they are just, it's so fun to just know these different people. So now they'll have the big unveiling on June 14th when they have the, up at the Multicultural. So this 15-foot by 5-foot sculpture. And it's all, and I just wish everybody could just have that experience in Pelican. Because it's such an amazing place to have your kids grow up. And walking up and getting up in front of those kids in that 5th grade art class. It was the biggest eye-opener. It's just amazing.
So let's we're both, even though we're both teachers, we're also both artists. And like for me, when I'm working on a big project, like you said, I just finished this big project. You have a connection to the character, right? And a lot of times, it's a relationship forms in the process, and it can become a deep connection as you're doing it. Also, you have this connection that you're trying to I want to hear what you're trying to build with the audience as you're working on these projects. Because for me, I'm always, my documentary work is all about building empathy, building connections, and how do we, the latest documentary I just finished was all about friendship at a very deep level, and how do we get people to realize that in the course of this film about mountain biking, right? And so... And
using video or using moving, I've never shot any video in my life.
But you're still a visual artist.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a photographer, and it's so fun when I look at movies, and I can miss the whole plot because I'm looking at, how did he light that? What did he, look at that near-far relation. Look at the depth of field. And then my wife will say, what did you get at? I go, shoot, I wasn't paying attention to that. So I do the same thing, but you could do so much more with film. You can... you can grab them and hold them. And I've just got an instant, and I've been a graphic artist, illustrator for most of my career. So this sculpture that I've created is fairly new to me as an illustration relief technique, but it's the same thing. I want to make a difference. I want to tell the story. So I'm going to hand out these brochures that have my artist statement,
Sure.
and I want people
Sure.
to see the texture and touch it, and hopefully they know me and they'll just go, wow, you grew up here, and you're just so honest about, you know, my really issues with that, and not feeling, you know, I've never felt like I've had a racist bone in my body, but when you stop and look at yourself and go, but yet why am I not hanging out with other people?
Yeah.
Why am I just hanging out
Sure.
with people
Sure.
that look like me?
Sure.
And that just bothered me.
Yeah.
It just bothered me because those little kids that were, you know, they were
Yeah.
acting like I did.
Yeah.
But it was a rainbow of color, and it
Yeah.
was just the biggest exciting thing. And I went, why on God's green earth, or isn't this town just wall to wall,
Yeah.
you know? So anyway, it's been the art has changed the artist, really.
Yeah.
And so it's been an awesome thing, but I just want to make a difference. Like the Pelican logo, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
This was another thing that happened to me. When you look at the Pelican logo, I designed that when Wayne Runnigan was mayor, and it's a positive negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to church one Sunday, and a lady came up to me and she said, "Are you Paul Johnson?" And I go, "Yeah." She said, "You know, I've been driving by the City of Pelican sign for 3 months, driving to Detroit Lakes to my job, and I never saw the Pelican in it until this last week." And I went, "Really?" And she said, "I'm so sorry." And I said, "No, that's awesome. That's what I wanted. I wanted some people to see the scene and other people to see the Pelican."
Yeah.
And I've shared that with all my students. I said, whether you're doing a little ad for the newspaper or you're doing a T-shirt, you got to make a difference. You want to grab somebody and have them come up to you and say, "Did you do this on purpose or whatever?" And that was, so I'm always trying to do that, even if it's for an instance. I want people to look at one element and go, "Wow, that's out of cardboard," or "I know that person," or "Oh, wow, I love what you wrote about this." And so just some interesting things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
definitely.
I would love, I mean, I had to learn technology. You and Micah, I'm sure you sat down and were like, "Yeah, what do you use for this? And how many megapixels for that? And what kind of memory? And blah, blah, blah. And what Adobe product?" And for me, you know, I had to learn all that stuff. And so my tool is an X-Acto blade, and you guys all grew up with phones and computers and all this stuff. So, but I'm just always so amazed with the work what both of you have done. So I'm just honored to have Micah looking at me over here by the window. I've seen his work. And I walked in and I went, "Oh yeah, these two guys, I bet they could just sit down and talk between themselves. And they don't need some old fart here."
No, this is great. This is great.
It was, I went, "Oh yeah, geez." I remember the first thing I saw that you had done was the basketball, the year they won.
Kazan.
Yeah. And Andy brought it home and showed me, and I went, "What?
Yeah.
It's awesome." And so, yeah, it's really an amazing thing. So,
Well, for a long time, it was just like a creative outlet. You know, like Kazan was
I
just
get
like
that.
like I had done a bunch in high school. Jim Fletcher was my two.
he was my art teacher.
Yeah, he's kind of the lost story in my through line of like, and I remind teachers of this sometimes, especially in creative stuff, of like, sometimes we just have to let kids be cut loose.
Yeah.
And
Isn't that the truth?
when I started in his class as a junior, maybe within 4 months of video productions, I came to him and said, "I have this big documentary project I want to do, and on the 1984 and the 1977 basketball team, and I want to drive all over the state and find these people and interview them."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Go for it.
Yeah.
Like whatever you need."
Yeah.
And then my parents also were like, "You need to get to the cities, we'll help you get there." You
Wow.
know? And so
How old are you when that?
I was a junior in high school.
Jeez.
And then the next year, I did one on the 93 and the 69 team.
Yeah.
And that was when I met Brian Korf for the first time.
Sure.
He was at Lester Prairie at the time and was up visiting. And so we
Yeah.
sat down for an hour and talked.
Yeah.
But I had done a lot of that stuff in high school, and then kind of, you know, in college trying to find who I was, got away from it, but always kept coming back to it. Like I liked these projects. Did Kazan in 09, and that was, I went to Brad Strand and just said, you know, I think both of us know this might happen. Like he might win. And how about I come along? and just fly on the wall the whole playoff thing. And if you don't win, I'll burn the tapes and we'll pretend I was never there.
Wow.
So
seriously.
Yeah. And again, like I had and at this time Brad and I were coworkers, but I had a trusting adult who said, I've worked with you before. I know you, like, I know the way you'll go about this. And so he said, yeah, come along. And I rode the bus and I was, eating. That's when Matt Haugen and I got our friendships. He's one of my best friends, but he was on that team.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
So there's like little nuggets in that film where you'll hear Matt talk about us eating pizza on the bus ride home and stuff like that. And then again, I kind of walked away from it for a while. And it was before the pandemic, I had seen a couple of like Amazon was really starting to push out the good documentary productions.
Yeah.
And I just thought, we had this soccer team and I thought there was a lot of story there. And I just thought, let's try and do this and we can share stories. And like, how do we share stories about people who are different from us and talk about things that are uncomfortable without being inflammatory?
Yeah.
It's a really huge challenge today.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the plan was always that 2020 season we were going to film, and then pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Mid-season, my mental health fell apart, and we happened to be recording all of it. And it was kind of the impetus that, like, I think I need to start talking about mental health, and started my own business from there. And
because I've always had mental health. I've been on Paxil for as old as Andy is.
Yeah.
And he's 31. So I've been on that. But I wonder what artists. I think it's because much empathy.
Yeah.
They have so much love for what they do, and it's their heart is just there. Yeah. And and if you hear anything negative, it's all taken internally. Yeah. But it's interesting. I think that's worth a study.
Yeah.
To find out how many artists.
And kind of since my diagnosis with bipolar, like so much of my art and like my business starting and all that was as much of an outlet for all of this as anything, like it was a way to keep myself organized during the day. It was a way for me to, make sure I was taking my meds and doing all the things. Yeah. And I talked to so many artists who are in the same, and not necessarily bipolar, but they all have some mental health struggles, and art is a huge outlet for that.
Yeah. Well, when you're teaching art in your classroom, I had my door was constantly open. Yeah. I had kids in there all the time. Yeah. All the time dealing with perfectionism and stress and mental health issues. Just and calling them up. Many people that I'm dropping out and going to find them and talking them back into class and doing all those things. But those are all the reasons why you teach and stuff. But that's really interesting, because my mom was an artist and she struggled with it, but never had any back in the day.
Right.
They didn't do anything. No. They sent you to Fergus Falls. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah. And there was no medication, electric shock therapy, and things like that. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was absolutely, and this country still has an issue with mental health, which is bothers me to no end. Yeah. That we still, there's this stigma about it. And so it's good that we're talking about it.
Yeah, 100%.
And to make it something we talk about, just period. Yeah. And like we talk about colds.
Right.
Yeah. And I can remember seeing all these faces when I tell them, I've been on Paxil for 25, 26, 27 years. And they're all like, what? And I go, oh, yeah, absolutely. And who hasn't gone down that road where you start questioning everything? Yeah. Yeah. And it's so I guess you're that person too. You're a counselor. You're that person too. But anyway, back to the Jim Fletcher. Yeah. So Michael would have had Jim Fletcher too, I suppose. Yeah. And think of the differences. I mean, what the changes that he made. I mean, he was back. I mean, we're talking the 70s here when I was in his first class. Sure. So he was in his first class, and he walked in, and he was so different. He was just different. Yeah. And you think back to those days in the 70s. there wasn't anything different. It was just a way to teach and whatnot. And so he came in, and I remember one time we walked into the library. Mrs. Lee, was she still at in the library, the librarian? And she was in there working, and Fletcher walked in, and I walked in behind him, and he kept going. And she was doing something, and I said, "Fletch," and I yelled it out. And he turns around, and she looks up like, "How are you talking to your art teacher with this kind of sound?" And I said, "Draw." And he turned around and he said, "All right." And we both pulled out pads of paper and pencils and started drawing each other. And Mrs. Lee she looked at us and she said, "Will you guys get out of here?" And it was just so much fun. We had a lot of fun. It was great. But he taught me animation, stop motion.
Sure.
So he got a little camera and it set me up in his back room. Remember that back room?
Yeah.
And I was sitting back there, and anything you wanted to do, the guy was there.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Yeah, so like I think our time's rolling down, but
Seriously?
I have one more.
Already?
Yeah, I have a question about like scaling things when you're doing art.
Yeah.
Right. This is a question I've been dying to ask you.
Oh, sure.
So like you're working on your sculpture, that's one thing. It's different from like at Trinity, where we both go to church.
Yeah.
There are the huge banners.
Yeah.
That you just make on a computer and make sure it's the right aspect.
Well, that's all vector.
Yeah.
So I worked in Illustrator, and so I do the Concordia. Everything's vector, so I don't have to worry about resolution.
Right. But when you're making like a sculpture, or like you have an idea first versus like it's going to be as big as this wall.
It was small. It was all small.
Yeah.
And
how do you go about that process?
Well, for those, I had my drawing. I scanned it in and then used the school's projector and just scanned in, and so I could see the line, all my line work, and then just moved it in and out simply. And some of it I had to redraw on my own, but I had an idea.
Gotcha.
And went to the post office and found as big a pieces of cardboard that I could find. So I'm always walking behind the stores, Strands, Ace Hardware, the food shelf. Oh, look at this great big piece of cardboard. This is going to be awesome. So the studio is just full of cardboard.
That's fantastic.
But but I still love Photoshop, and I know you guys work in that, but you got to know your resolution.
Yeah.
So I'd go walking into my class going, "Say you want a resolution," and start singing this to my students to get them loosened up, about learning about Photoshop, because I had to teach them that. So play the Beatles in the background. Anyway,
of course.
Gotta have the dad jokes.
Is music on usually when you're doing art?
Always jazz.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always jazz. It's American, It's American, and it's so creative, So I'm listening to jazz, Dizzy Gillespie, just the classical guys. But I'm a big Stefan Grappelli jazz violin. So
sure,
puts a smile on your face, and I go, "Guys, we're gonna listen to this because art and jazz are the same, It is." So
sweet.
Yeah. Well, listen, it has really been a pleasure.
Yeah, man. This is good.
Andy said, "Hi, you're going to talk to," and I go, "I know this guy. I say hi to him. You tell me everything, but I honestly have never sat down and visited with this guy."
Yeah.
And as a teacher, you go, guy. That's awesome. Teachers that have a calling. I think we've all had teachers where they didn't go into it because they just wanted to, for whatever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't their calling.
Yeah.
But you've been called to do this.
Yeah. Thank you. Man.
And also as an artist, man, I'm just really impressed with both you guys.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, 3 guys that have been touched by Jim Fletcher and his antics over the years. So that's an awesome thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man.
So
this is
anyway,
good to
visit with you.
Yeah, absolutely.